Ahoy everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our Java programming tutorials. In this episode we'll be covering functions and arrays, although before we get started and get too far in, I'd like to cover a few things that I skimmed over last episode. So right at the end of this episode I did this I++, and I didn't really talk about math operators much. Because we weren't using them and they're pretty self-explanatory. If you have any combination of variables and numbers, you can do operations to them like you would expect. If you have 4 and then put plus and then 4, that will yield 8, and so on and so forth. The only thing that may be odd is if you had a number, you could then type a % and then another number, and this will give you the remainder. So this is saying the remainder of 4 divided by 2, and so this would yield 0. Whereas 4 divided by 2 would yield 2. And so this I++ that I used is it's a shorthand method. So if we have an integer I, and we set it equal to 0, now, if we wanted to add 1 to this, one way you can do that is setting I equal to I plus 1. And if we print that out, and print out I, let's move this. And so if we printed this out, that would give us 1 here, because we're taking I, which is equal to 0, and adding 1. But instead of writing out that, because this is looks a bit clumsy, so instead what we can do is we can do I++. And this statement is exactly the same as this statement. These two statements are equal. And so there's a couple other things we can do too. We can have I, for instance, plus equals, and then we can put a number. And this will take I and add 12 to the existing value. And the same goes for I minus equals a number. You can also put plus I and then a semicolon. And so what this does, instead of I++, so if you have, so in our for loop here, we have this expression. And what it's doing is it's initializing the variable, and then it's going to go through the loop, and it checks the value of I, and then adds 1 to it. So that's the array starts at 0, and it will loop through to 25. So I equal 25. If we had it like this, with the pluses in front, it will add and then look at the variable. So this was plus I, we would loop from I equals 1 to I equals 25. That's just a bit of stuff to keep in mind if you ever do anything. And so let's clean up our program a bit here. Get rid of all this other garbage. And so one other thing is Eclipse is giving us this warning here saying that it's never closed. So let's just take care of that. Let's come down here, still inside our main method. I'm just going to type scanner, which is what we named our variable, .close. And this just finalizes things up. This says that we're done accessing scanner, and so it will get rid of it. Java will do its garbage collection, and it will disappear into the ether. And so anyway, let's cover functions then, because the most easiest example we can have of this is we can put our random number here into a function. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is up above our main method, and Java, unlike other languages, functions can be before or after the thing calling them. You don't have to define them ahead of time. Java will go through and find it itself. But I like having my main method be last, just because it helps organize things. So we're going to come up here, and we're going to type static. And so here's a good time to start going into what all this means. So in our main method, we have public static void. And what's that saying? This is a public function, meaning everything in this file and in any other file inside of our package can see it. It's static, meaning I don't have to initialize it like I did here. I don't have to have function main equals new function like we have here. It always exists. And void is the return type, meaning this function is not going to output anything. And so for our random number function, we're going to want to output an int. So we're going to do public, we're going to do static int. Doesn't need to be public, and by default things default to private, although it helps just to do it sometimes. Anyway, static int. So it's always going to exist, and it's going to return an integer. And then we need to name it, and we're going to use the Java naming convention for functions, and we're going to call it get and then num. And maybe 95% of the time, the Java convention works, where you type either get or set and then a descriptor. So we're going to be getting a number, and our function is therefore called getNum. If we had a variable and we wanted to set a value to it or something, like if we wanted to set a string to just be hello, welcome to, guessing game, then it would be set variable name or something like that. But we're going to do getNum, and we don't need any arguments because we are just going to be executing literally this one line of code. And we're going to do function for random number. And then it'll come down, brackets. I prefer my brackets to be like that. It doesn't really matter. There's also a Java convention for it's called Camelback variable naming. So where the first one's always lowercase, doesn't really matter. It's just a style thing. Anyway, so right in here, we're going to literally copy this one line of code out from below, and we're going to put it up here. And then we'll force it to be define this in int. So that's there, and we can get rid of that declaration there. All right, we'll move this up here. Now it's telling us that we don't have a return statement, because we're saying we're going to be outputting an int, but we're not actually doing that. So we're going to need to type return and then random num. And so then that will return random num. So, yeah. And so now down here, we're seeing that all these random nums here are now red. And that's because this variable up here is not within this scope. So in programming, there's a term called scope. That basically means the range where a variable exists. So for instance, here in our main user in, it exists everywhere inside our main method because we define it in the main method. It exists inside this while loop as well as outside of it. If we were to define a variable inside the while loop, and then tried to access it afterwards, like down here, then we wouldn't be able to because it would be out of scope. And so up here, this variable is also out of scope because after we exit this function, this ceases to exist. Like for all intents and purposes, it may be still loaded into memory because this is a static function. But as far as the main method cares, this is just gone. What we can do down here is we can have int random num equals get num. So we've called the function get num that we just made, and we're setting it equal to that. If we save, we can see that all our things go away. And so we can run it and see it works just as before. 6, type 4, there we go. Let's talk about arrays next. So an array is a grouping of variables. A string is basically an array in itself. It's an array of characters. But in Java, you don't have to worry about that like in other languages like C++. But so an array, and just down here for testing purposes, let's make an integer array. So let's do something like int I, and then to define array you put brackets. So int I, and then you can define a size in here, or you can manually assign it out here. So like 1, 2. So now we have an array I, which has 2 places. It holds the values 1 and 2. Now a key thing to remember about arrays is that the first position, let me change these numbers so it's more obvious what I'm talking about. This position, the position holding the number 4, that is position 0. So if we want to print out, when print out I of 0, that will print out 4. And I of 1 will print out 12. See? 4. So that's something to remember. That's why before when I made the for loop, I started at 0. Because the first position of an array is 0. And in computer science and in programming in general, most things will start at 0. Computers use 1 and 0. So anyway, let's make a function with an array inside of it. Let's make a function that will insult the user whenever they miss their guess. So, okay, again, up here out of our main method, we're going to make a separate function. We are going to make a static. We want it to always exist. String, not all caps, string. And then let's call this get insult. And there we go. Brackets, there we go. And so we're going to use an array. So let's have int I equals here's what we can do. Let's randomly pick which insult we want to give them inside of the function. That way everything's self-contained and we keep as much out of the main method as possible. So in here, let's change this over from random num to I, and let's make this generate numbers from 1 to 10. And so now let's define our array. And we want a string array because we want to send text. And let's call this insults. insults, square brackets, equals, not new line, equals, and then we're going to put our insults in here. And before we do that, let's go ahead and type this before you forget. And so this function right here it will work. It'll just return nothing. So it will return a value. The value will just be null. So let's populate some insults in here. I have a list that I've already created, so we don't have to sit and watch me misspell things. So there we go. We have a list of 10 insults, and each time we call the function, it will randomly pick an insult and send it to the user. So now let's come down to our main function and use it. And we'll type plus to add more text to the printout, and then get insult brackets. So then this will add our insult onto the end of each of these. Let's test this out. So if we pick 50, it will, you are too high. So see, look what's happening. So, and this is a thing to remember about formatting. The computer will print out exactly what you have formatted. So again, if we pick 50, there we go. Your guess is too high. Are you even trying? If you do 50 again, your guess is too high. I spit in your direction. 50 again. Oh, let's see what happened here. Job out of bounds. Yeah, so look. This is what I was talking about. I even forgot. Our array is 10 long. Like I said earlier, the first array position is 0. So if we generate numbers between 1 and 10, then first of all, we're never going to get nice try, buddy. And we're also going to walk off the end of this array, causing this error. So what we can do, we can fix that, is we could change this to generate numbers between 0 and 9. But the easiest way is if we just put a -1 on I. So then we will always be within bounds of this array. And so that's basically it. I do want to do one more thing, though, before we stop, just to give an example of logic on strings, because it's slightly different. Because your standard equals, less than, greater than operators don't work on strings because they're not numbers. Like you can't see if well, you can cast the characters to integers, but you have to do it on a character by character basis. Where if you had a whole string, that would be time consuming and it would take up more code than you really need to do. So let's make a string called play. I'm going to set play to y, lowercase y. So, and let's come over here. Let's do while play dot equals, and so here we can see it's giving us lots of options. So there is a dot equals. Then there's a down here, there's a dot equals ignore case. And it explains what it does right, its name. Dot equals will match a string exactly, including capitalization, while dot ignore case will match everything except capitalization. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow the user to input capital or lowercase y, where if we use just equals, they'll only be able to input lowercase y and have it work. I'm going to have while play dot equals ignore case y, we are going to run all this. indent it over to keep our formatting correct. And see, now after we get out of this loop, let's ask the user if they want to play again. I'm going to get yelled at in the comments down there for that, but I'm not caring. I'd like to play again. There we go. And if we want to be technical, we'll put character marks around it to denote that that is what we were entering. And so we'll want our scanner to read things as again, which we still have it. So we can do, we can do play equals scanner dot next line. And we don't need next line. Let's do just dot next, which will get the next group of characters up to a space or new line symbol. So either space or enter. So they could enter Y space, Y space, Y, and with next would only catch Y. And see what this will do is at the start of the game, we have Y, we have play set to Y, yes, and so we'll go through and we'll play. And as we come down, let's set, So the beauty of this is if they enter Y, then cool, everything's still Y. If they enter no, in, or anything actually other than Y, then we'll just exit the game. And we could be robust with our code and make cases for if they don't enter either of them, or if they enter a number, or if they enter some other character other than Y or N, but this is a guessing game, and so who cares? And so that will just set that, and so now the user can play as many times as they want. 54, hey, would you like to continue? Yes, I would actually. 50, I spit in your direction. If we win, and then, hey, would you like to continue? No, I would not. There you go. And so that's the guessing game. Next time, we will be covering classes and interfaces. So we'll be making a program which will be taking up 2 files, possibly 3, depending on how in-depth we want to go into it. But thank you all for watching. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If there's anything you'd like to see in the next video, put that down there as well. Thank you all for watching, and in the words of Gamefruit Pulp, I will catch you all next time.